Eric with Urban Story Studio here, and today I want to kind of look back at some drawings that I did in the past, because recently someone asked me about these drawings that they thought looked good, but they said, how can we standardize them? How can we create a consistent look and feel so every time we do design diagrams like this, they basically, we can kind of recreate it, hopefully relatively simply and consistently. And I thought about it and I said, well, in my head, I was like, well, I did these in Photoshop originally, and the ones that you can see here behind me. And there's a lot of little trickery with strokes and fades and dash lines. And you have to export everything from SketchUp. And when you do that, it becomes locked and fixed. And so the problem, of course, is if you change the tower height, or if you added something like to a road, or you wanted more context, change the camera angle, you'd have to redo all the diagrams, all the exports, all the layers, all that stuff has to be redone. So I said, well, what if we just stayed in SketchUp, did a little bit of pre-work, a little bit of pre-thinking, and then move into layout. And I know layout's not perfect, but how close can we get to replicating a somewhat of a templatized process? So that's what we're going to do right now. Stay with me. So again, this is sort of the build-up. This is the sort of a base diagram where you could toggle layers on and off. Let me show you that in Photoshop. So here in Photoshop, this is again where I just kind of replicated some stuff. I had some different context pieces, some arrows, and this is where it kind of gets interesting, because this is where we're looking at the architecture or the SketchUp exports. So I would go in and basically export a podium layer, maybe export a tower layer, and then I would use that as reference to apply some color overlays and apply some strokes and maybe some opacities. So actually quite a few things going on in order to recreate this style. And of course, this is just one diagram of many. I have to do a different version with different colors and things like that. Now, I'm not saying that SketchUp needs to be able to recreate these things like arrows and dashed lines, or layout has to. We could always come in and bring in some information, draw some information right on the layout page. But for the most part, what I want to do today is sort of look at the structure of how I might be able to recreate something similar to these in just SketchUp and layout. So let's do that now. So I already tried this before recording this video because I like to be somewhat prepared for you. And this is kind of the result that I've got. And I'm going to show you, kind of giving you the, I guess, spoiler alert. I'm showing you the end process before we get to it. But I want to show you why this is important. Is number one is, let's say I get, hey, Eric, this camera angle needs to change. Well, now that I've got this all pre-set up as a template in layout, if I were to come in here, find the right model, we're going to apply this to a second model in just a minute. Say, hey, Eric, your camera angle here, say, is too high. We want to lower that down. Well, if I lower this down just a little bit, say, or maybe turn it around this way a little bit, okay. I'm going to go ahead and update this, save it, pop back over to layout, right click, update model reference. And you can see there that everything just shifted slightly. So you can see that change. It did it to all the diagrams. It did it to all the stacked viewports, not just because each one of these is a stacked viewport. So the kind of cool thing about that is it's very flexible. The other thing I'm going to look at the end is we're going to swap this model out here for a completely different set of buildings for a master plan. And we're going to see how that style works as well. So let's go look at how I created this. Let's go pop back into SketchUp. I did that scene change just briefly. Let's see, what we're going to need for this is we're going to need styles, we're going to need tags, and that's pretty much it. Okay, I think. So one thing I've done here is I've sort of pre-thought the different kinds of styles I want. So this first one you see, this is color by tag turned on. So color by tag, I have one with no edges. So it's just colors saying I want rooftops highlit, I want podiums. So it's basically how I've organized this. We'll look at the organization in a second. I've also got color by tag with edges, so I can see context. I have faded line work. So if I click off of that, you can see that it looks really ghosted, almost like fog. It looks really ghosted back, and that's because if I want to layer or stack these things, I want some, like maybe the rooftops to pop. So perhaps I'll use this faded one. And then I have just my kind of my typical diagram style, like my default setting, and that is just with profiles bumped up to 2 and with the edges. So of course I could show you some of the settings. Profiles 2, edges, it's not quite black, but it's this, I think for me I use iron, which is sort of like slightly less black. If I go to black, it gets a little thick and heavy. If I do gray, it starts to fade. So I kind of like that middle ground, so I use that iron. So that's styles. You can see here that I've got 4 different styles set up. Now, of course, I can create as many as I want if I come up with a different look and feel or a different scenario for a particular diagram. And I don't really need these tags here. These scenes. I only need one scene because I want one scene to be like, this is my camera angle. And the reason why, if I change that camera angle, I want to be able to update that scene. So I don't really need these scenes. This really just shows me what the styles look like because I applied them to a scene, and it just is a quicker way to switch between styles. So that's the scene, the CBT one. This is the one that's going to go to layout. I can rename this if I wanted to. I can just call this one for layout, whatever. So really quick, let's talk about organization, especially when we get to color by tag. So I've duplicated my buildings, and I think this is where the system starts to show its weaknesses a little bit. For example, I really want there to be this thing called color by tag states. So for example, I could say I want everything except this to be white, and then I would save that as a state. And then another state would be I want only this tag to be this color. We can't do that, so in this case what I've done is I've duplicated this building set here. So if I turn everything off, and I'm trying to keep it as few tags as possible. I have all my massings just turned in one group, one tag, and the reason for that is because I can just get them solid white. And I have my context. My context is my ground plane, and I have, in this case, I'll leave my context on. I have my back podiums, I have my front podiums, I have my middle roof or my podium roof, and then I have my tower roof, and I have my towers, I have my back towers, and I have my front towers. So the colors, the organization here, as far as how I wanted to tell this story, it was really talking more about, for this project, about what was happening here. There was a train line, so these buildings had to have different land uses, and they had different setback heights versus what was happening on this side of the street. So it was very much organized with telling the story in this very constrained site, but in almost like this 2 sides, like the property had 2 different programs or design goals. Anyway, that doesn't really matter too much for this sake. We could make up a story for whatever we wanted to call attention to. But that's what I did here. That's kind of how I organized it. So I just kind of created tags, and I just kind of tagged things however I wanted. So once I've saved this here, I can send this to layout. So let's actually go to layout, and we'll create a new one here. What I'll do is pop over to layout, and what I'm going to do is copy one of these viewports, and I'll just create a new page so we can recreate this together. So I'm going to paste this in place. Now this viewport is the diagram, is the model that I just showed you. So of course I could go relink it and scale it and all that stuff, but I've already got it to scale and everything, so to save time, I'm just going to copy it from that other page. So it's ortho, preserve scale, 1 to 300, looks great. I've also got this as vector under my rendering style. And the reason why is because vector you can see I can zoom in and in and in and in, and it looks pretty nice. And I can change the thickness. So if I wanted to go a little bit thicker, I don't have to rely on SketchUp to do that. I can kind of control this here in layout. I'm going to leave that nice and thin for now. And then of course, if we want to change that, we can later. So this first one here, because I have these tags organized, if I pull my tags, let's see if I can, here, you can see all my tags here. I don't really need layers. I don't really need pages for this. I really only need tags, and I need my styles. So, and that's it. So tags and styles are all within this SketchUp model menu. So we're basically going to override the viewport to only show what I want to show. So let's do that. Here, this is the context. So for example, I might want to come in and maybe draw some arrows, or I might want to come in and highlight what's happening on the ground floor. If that's the case, then I would, style that however I want. And I could do that using just right here I can obviously go to a program like Illustrator, but I can do that right here in Layout. So I'm going to leave this base one as a sort of like what's happening on the ground floor. So let's copy both of these. I can use the modifier just like in SketchUp. And I'm going to pop over. Sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. So now I can go turn on. If I wanted to turn everything on, I can. And you can see in layout what happens. I'll probably turn the roofs off because the roofs are duplicates and we don't need those. So when I go through my styles, I can hit color by tag with lines, color by tag only. So if I wanted to just put a pop of color on just one area, I could do that. Or if I wanted to contrast it and make it just not show the lines for some reason. I have my faded line work, and that's it. I have a duplicate of my faded. I'm not sure why. So here what I would do is I would copy this viewport. And for example, if this first one I want to talk about is what's happening on the ground level, which is the podiums. So I'm going to paste that viewport in place. And I'm going to turn everything off on this pasted viewport except for maybe both my podiums. So I've got an option here. I could come over here to my hidden line style. And you can see that I've just used the black and white line work to differentiate with what's happening on the podium. Now, because this is a vector, if I wanted to bump this, like I just said a second ago, if I wanted to bump that line style up a little bit, let me see, I might have to send that one to the back. Grab that one, let's see what happens. There we go, too thick. I don't really like that, it's 0.3. We'll find a happy medium. We want to be careful we're not doing too much editing here in the viewport because that's why we did all this work in SketchUp. So here I can also change my mind and say, well, what happens if I add color to those? What happens if I only want to talk about the rear podiums first? So what I could do is I could come in here to my context and I could turn my front podiums. I could turn, let's see here, maybe I want to bring the context up to the front. And maybe I want to turn the towers, all the towers off. I don't really want to talk about towers at all. So just kind of a few different options for how I want to style that. I'm going to send this to the back. I'm going to keep the towers on because I like them because they're ghosted. And for this one, because it looks weird like the back one's floating, I'm going to go ahead and bring the front podiums in as well. So let's see here, select the right one, get that's front podiums. This is what I'm going to talk about podiums. So let's keep going here just for sake of time. And I'm going to just copy that over. Of course, I can adjust these if I don't like the way it fits. I can always move these around, but I'm not too worried about that right now. We're moving fairly quickly. This one, same thing, turn podiums off, maybe I want to talk about the towers. And I want to say, hey, here's what's going on in those towers. And I can also, again, if I wanted to look at just creating a block of color only, I could do that. One thing I would like to do is actually, have a stroke on these. And I think that's something that is missing from the SketchUp tool set, which is the style set, which is to do just border edges. If you wanted to do border edges, it's fairly quickly. You could probably do it in a couple minutes of tracing. Right here in layout, but of course the problem is if the tower changes or if the camera angle changes, then this now is locked to this viewport. So you probably don't want to do any tracing over anything until you know for sure that it is everything is sort of fixed for the most part that you can anticipate. But even if you have to redo it, it only takes a few minutes. It's really not the end of the world. And you may not have to do it to all of them, only one diagram. So I'm going to just copy all of these down and maybe shift all of these up so they sit sort of centered on the page. And then for this one, I'm going to go to faded, and I'm going to open up my tags again. And I'm going to I'm going to leave that the way it is. I'm going to copy it, paste it in place, switch to CBT lines. I'm going to turn podiums off for that one. I'm going to turn towers on for this one. So we can talk about, oh wait, we already did that one. Okay, so what we're going to do is do tower front and podium, tower back, yeah, there we go. Okay, that's what I want to do. And then for this one, I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to turn, let's see, I'm going to copy this. There we go. Let's see, I want to do just the front. So we want to turn those back, podium off. And we want to turn the Front tower's on. That looks pretty good. And this last one, this is where it's a little bit different. I want to do my rooftops. So I want to talk about what's happening on the roofs here. So what I'm going to do is turn everything off, and then I'm going to copy for this viewport. Remember, there's two viewports. Should be two viewports. If not, I'm going to copy, paste a new one, and then I'm going to turn everything off except for my roofs. Roof 1, roof 2. Switch to CBT hidden line. Now this one doesn't really work as well because you can see what's happening here is that the roofs are, if you do them by themselves, the roofs are sitting on top of the geometry because of the stacked viewports. And like I said, I can't create color by tag states to say I want this buildings to be, I want to override the colors of this building for this view only. That would be nice. So that's why what I did was I created an extra, and it's called buildings. And so again, I can look at fading that buildings if I want to fade that. Let's see here. Probably want to do color by tag on that one. Yeah, I think I have to do it that way. Okay. So let me pause there for 1 second, and I want to just reinforce where we started a second ago. I'm going to change the camera angle, or I'm going to move, actually I'm going to move a building, and so you can see how the ripple effect is somewhat minimal. And then the last thing I want to do is switch this whole building, this whole thing out and show that this can work for a different kind of project as long as it's organized the same way. So let's pop over here into SketchUp really quick and say for whatever reason this building has to come down in height. Maybe it's too tall. So I'm just going to grab a couple of floors. I'm going to grab, this is probably not the way you should, it should be modeled, but this is just for my demo. So and then I want to just, the only thing I have to do is because the roofs are separate, I'm going to have to move the roof down separately, and I want to lift it up just enough so that it's sitting above the surface. We don't get that Z fighting. All right, so keep an eye on that. I'm going to save it, pop over to layout. I'm going to come over here. So keep an eye on this tower here and update model reference. Okay, it shrunk, and it shrunk for all of them, and that's really cool. I don't have to change the diagram. I don't have to redo anything, no exports. It's updated. So I want to do, I want to end really quick with saying what happens if we were to change this project out for another. For example, the whole point of this is that we maybe could create a template. So let me do this. Let me take this, let's see here. I think I have one here. So I have another project, and it's not too dissimilar, a little wider site, not so dense, maybe a little more traditional. And let's say I drop this into my diagram template that I saved, and here are my tags. So all I have to do is go in and say, this is podium back. And I would say, this is podium front. Sorry, that's tower front. And this one is tower back and podium front. And let's see, podium back. And then we also want to create one. I'm just going to create one for this to make it easier. I hope that works. And we're just going to call this roof. And just for fun, I'm going to change the color so that it just looks a little bit different because we're talking about stuff on the roof. So for that, I'm probably going to turn everything except the rooftops off. I actually have the roof separated, so if I wanted to do two, I could, but I'm just going to move a little bit quicker. And I'm going to put those all on the roof tag, so they should show up green, and there they are. So what I'm going to do is save this, and then I'm going to come over to my layout file, and we're just going to right click on this. Oh, one thing I need to do is make sure that my context is tagged. So this needs to be tagged as context. Save that. Now we can come over here into layout, and I should be able to file, document setup, come over here to relink, because what I want to do is grab this second project, not my first one, open that up. It's thinking it's probably going to mess with my viewport boundaries. I'm probably going to have to change those, and that's okay. It's not without any work at all. And I'm going to hit close. Okay, so it's a little bit disjointed, but that's okay because I may have, my tags were slightly different in this one. So in this case, what I want to do is say, maybe change my viewport boundary so that maybe I need to change the scale. I don't think I want to. So for this one here, I would turn off my roofs. So for this one here, I might turn off my roofs and I might come over here to CBT edges. And that looks pretty good. I'm talking about what's happening on the ground floor. If this is too light here, I might come back over into my SketchUp model and I might say, ooh, it's a little bit light, not a problem. I just edit that, click this, come over here to a slightly less faded gray, save that. Update the model reference, and it gets just a little bit darker. So there we go. So I'm not going to clean all of these up. You can see there's a little bit of work I need to do to basically turn off tags that I didn't want, or maybe even restyle things. Like I want to make sure that I have edges. I didn't actually do this, set this up exactly like I probably should have as a template, but I hope that you're kind of getting an idea of what's possible, so that we can actually go in and start to save us some work. So I can copy this. Let's see here. Let's turn context off. Let's turn podiums off. There we go. If I wanted to, I just, I have all the things essentially at my fingertips to be able to toggle on and off exactly as I want. And so that way I can call attention to different things at different times. For example, I can copy this and maybe paste this faded one in, paste that one in place. So example, paste that in place, come over here to faded style, and then turn on my podiums and my towers, and maybe even send that to backwards. Send that to the back. So again, if I wanted to, I could come in and turn this context off. And that way I've got everything I want. I could do roofs. I could do here, probably for the roofs. I want to do CBT edges. It's just really, really cool. Same thing applies if I want to change the camera angle a little bit. If I want to get rid of something, make a building taller, I can do that. So a little bit of cleanup that I needed to do. It wasn't perfect, but I think the process is replicatable. And I think that, I don't know, my proof of concept, I'm pretty happy. So I'm going to leave you there. I think that pretty much wraps it up. I want to say thank you all for watching. As always, if you haven't already subscribed, if you're new to this channel, I'd love to have you stick around and see some new stuff that's coming down the pipe soon. So with that, I'll let you go. See you next time.